going on. But in reality, if you look at the marketing budget and how much it's decreased globally, it's like a 9% decrease in US marketing budget as a whole, which certainly we're seeing a lot more than 9% of sponsors kind of exiting out of esports right now. And I know from talking to people behind the scenes, loads of these esports orgs have just taken deliverables for granted. They're not delivering on any of it. They're not even following it up. They've promised things that they're going to get like players or influencers under their banner to do stuff that they don't do. And that might have flown when esports was the hot shit in 2016 to 2018. Now that it isn't the hot shit anymore, sponsors are saying to orgs, you didn't deliver on any of this shit, and we're out. We're not resigning.
I mean, here's the thing. As you know, as if we want to transition the conversation to the advertising front, there's been a couple of different problems. First off, the problem is that starting at the end of last year and into this beginning parts of this year, a lot of advertising budgets were frozen because people didn't know what the economy was doing, and there was a lot of fear within the industry. And they've started to get kind of unlocked now for later in this year, and so we're starting to see movement. That's something we've experienced at Last Free Nation here. So one of the other issues, though, to your point, Richard, is that this chains into the conversation about, you know, growth that we had in terms of the venture capital with the audience, which is that there was going to be this infinite growth, and therefore a sponsorship, you know, a prominent sponsorship in esports was worth millions and millions and millions of dollars, because the number of eyeballs that were going to be on the logo, on the stream, right? Because this was back when LCS did have significant viewership, and that was going to convert into people buying the products. I think what has become like very clear to these sponsors is that when they sponsor a league or a team, they are paying millions of dollars. They're getting like a logo on the shoulder.
Exposure, basically, just exposure.
Yeah. A logo on the shoulder. And by the way, guys, if you don't think the time that logo's on screen is tracked, it absolutely is, like down to the second a lot of the times. So literally there are services that track this information that say like, okay, we saw this team on camera for X amount of time. Here's the number of seconds that this logo was visible. Here was the viewership at the time the logo was visible. So they're very active in tracking these efforts, and it's very granular a lot of the time. And then the other factor is they would say, we have these deliverables. We are going to give you these YouTube videos. Unfortunately, the teams themselves have done a shit job for the most part at making sure that people watch their content, at engaging in good branding, at making compelling content. So what they're actually selling is $3 million for a logo and then a 2,000 view YouTube video. And so advertisers, yeah.
Sorry, I want you to finish. I have so much to say about this topic, but yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the value has been incredibly low. And then on top of that, here's the other thing, guys. Fans do not react, and I'm sure a lot of you are going to hit the YouTube comments and talk about this. Fans have reacted very badly to sponsorships from teams and leagues, as in they don't go buy the products. They don't feel that they're supporting the team by buying the products. They don't feel that they're supporting the league or the broadcast by buying the products. It is very
it's really sad, Monty. I've heard there's even some TSM fans didn't put their entire life savings into FTX. I mean, come on, guys. You're not even going to support the team. Come on.
I mean, I was just going to add to that point, though, as well. Like, esports fans are scumbags and they don't spend any money. But, like, at this stage, who could blame them? How many times do you have to get burnt, you know?
I disagree, because one of the weird things about us is that, so with our content, I mean, Richard, your Substack's doing very well. You've had very successful Patreons in the past.
I'm not reaching out to esports fans. I'm reaching out to Richard Lewis fans. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And like,
but I'm
even saying fuck esports fans. Like, I know who who my tribe are. You know what I mean?
Richard, there are a lot of fans that do support esports fans that will support individual influencers and content creators. So what brands have found is that, and Devin, I will let you talk, and you can talk. I know you have a lot of information about this.
I literally run millions in ad budget on this shit. I can say so much. Okay.
So we all know that esports advertising fucking sucks. Okay. But we have had success at Last Free Nation because when we do things like freeze pipe, you guys actually went out and bought a shitload of freeze pipes. Okay. So we know that it's not esports Okay. It is the way that esports has been advertised. Now, part of that is that a lot of people watch our content. LFN currently does almost 1.5 million podcast downloads a month across all of our podcasts. So you guys are crushing it. Thank you. But it's that when people feel an affinity, whether it's through an influencer or you guys directly supporting us, you know this supports us. And if you see a product you like, you go buy it. Nobody has bought a product because it was on CLG's jersey. I don't believe that that's true. Like, or very few people, hence Devin's example of the, 17 PCs that have been sold.
Yeah.
So I don't know why. I can't tell you why psychologically it works this way, where people do not support the sponsors of teams and leagues, but they just appear not to do that. And to put a cap on this, I will say that as an example, LFN is currently in talks with sponsors that have left LCS, because it's not that they don't want the esports audience. It's the price of sponsoring the LCS versus the return they get is so high, and they see value in us, not in the league.
It's because it's the steps removed, right? So if you look at a funnel, it's the LCS and then the teams and then the players. And so for you to buy a product from an influencer, you need to know, like, and trust that person. Well, that's 3 steps removed of the opportunity to do so, because you have to tell the story all the way down the funnel. Right. So what we do at Novo is we run, like I said, ad budget. And so I've run ad budget against esports. I've run ad budget against Twitch and all these different places. My ad budget this year is 6x what it was last year. Want to know the only difference? Last year, 70% of my business was Twitch. This year, it's less than 3%. Why? Because nobody is spending on esports teams, on Twitch, and these places, because they're not getting that return on investment. What happens is that when somebody puts ad budget into that, and they do it for exchange of these deliverables, these brands come in, they have what's experimental ad budgets. So one of the crazy things I learned when I went into the agency world, every single dollar that's been spent on esports pretty much is just a very small portion of a gigantic ad budget of these brands. They're using experimental ad budget, which is usually 5 to 10% of their total spend, to kind of figure out what happens. And they're basically trying to answer a question: am I going to get burned or not? And so what has happened across Twitch and esports is that these, whether the deliverables are completed or not, what everyone needs to understand about advertising is the gold standard for advertising is Google AdWords. And your typical ROAS, your typical return on putting $1 into Google AdWords, is between 1.3 and 3.4 dollars per dollar. So if I sell a shirt for $10, I can expect to get $3 to $4 of those shirts back every single time that I put that in. Okay, so that's just the guarantee. So if I put my money in there, it's like mutual funds. I just get that return back 99% of the time. It's easily trackable. So unless esports and influencer marketing can beat that ROAS, there is no reason not for those brands to throw into PPC. Combine that with bad sales structure, bad conversations, bad relationships with the teams, and back and forth, uncompleted deliverables. Brands don't need to be in esports. They're just going to say, fuck it. Yeah, take our spend and put it somewhere else. I've literally had brands tell me, I'm like, yo, get us out of Twitch. And by the way, this is notwithstanding the all the other freaking controversies, the hot tub stuff, whatever you go down the list of things in esports that are just not brand friendly, that could just, even if they were getting a good ROAS, would just get them out of the sphere, right? There are so many reasons just not to advertise in this space.
Yeah, let me tie it to what Richard was saying, though, because here's the thing, Richard. You actually inadvertently nailed what Monty's talking about, though, which is the reason why I would advertise with Richard Lewis is because you have Richard Lewis fans. Dude, a Richard Lewis fan's way more valuable than a generic esports fan. I mean, I've made this joke before to Monty that a couple of years ago, there was an NFL playoff game. And at this playoff game, if you can't tell, this was a complete plant. They had the actor, Rob Lowe, and he was just there doing that Hollywood smile. And as he did that, he just had a hat that said NFL. And I said, Monty, that has to be a plant. No one in the world is just a fan of the NFL. He wasn't a fan even of a team there, just the NFL, not even the Rams or something. So the joke of that, though, is that's why, by the way, that corporate stuff's a nightmare, because they want you to believe there could be a fan of the NFL. But even the NFL doesn't have fans. So to sort of answer this question, half of the problem to me of the funnel that Devin's describing is, if I'm a fan of League of Legends, I'm usually either a fan of the game or the player, right?
Yes.
Whichever it is, when I watch the LCS and they go sponsored by Nationwide, I don't go, well, I love League of Legends, so I should get Nationwide. I don't think I love Doublelift, so I should get Nationwide. Those don't connect in my brain. The game doesn't, in the same way as it's not a fan of the NFL. Now, I might be a fan of the team, right? But think of this even. If I'm a fan of Doublelift's team, well, we all know Doublelift played for CLG 1 year, then TSM a couple of years, then Team Liquid. So again, do I have a direct connection in my brain of when I buy the Team Liquid sponsor, it helps Doublelift? Not really. But here's the thing. If somehow the campaign was done double lift connecting with his real fans authentically, dude, I wasn't a fan. I might buy that product then. Maybe then I would connect. So to me, actually sort of going down to this grassroots approach upwards instead of because the last thing I was going to say is this, Devin. I get why the team orgs did it to begin with, because just like franchise leagues, this is a very traditional model that sponsors understand. So you think when you go to them, you understand, like, right, it's like NASCAR. You get this many seconds on screen. You're the fourth one online on my jacket. You know, they sort of get that. But the mistake that we made in esports is that model would never work for us. Like you say, the ROI is terrible. So actually, we always needed essentially to revolutionize. And in fact, we need to educate the sponsors to some degree. What
yes,
do you think?
100%. And what you said, Thorin, like, so what I just explained was the financial model, like the return on advertising spend, the objective thing. What Thorin just talked about is the second and equally as critical thing, which is the story. It's just that I am not invested enough as a fan, as a follower, as a person to actually get behind and buy a product. And a lot of that is because of the LCS's rules and the feast or famine attitude they've had around, like, look, if you don't compete at the highest level, you're going to get fucking relegated. Okay, well, now I've got to import a bunch of Eastern players that are mechanically better but don't have as good narrative because they don't speak fucking English. So like, how am I going to be able to make those attachments and create those stories, right? And something I hope we cover on the podcast is we were talking about how impactful those CLG versus TSM fights felt in 2017 with the crowds roaring. You don't, like, even if the viewership is 10 to 14% down, the hype is like 300% down. Like in America, in like, again, in China, you got people chanting outside of apartments and stuff like that. That's cool. But here, that feeling that you're talking about, Thorin, that feeling of like the jazz of watching it, it's dying. Or that's like when I think of esports really dying, that's what I think of as the stories, as narratives.
There's like 3 points to this. And so, okay, so the first thing is just overall, the owners massively watered down their own product. I know Duncan's been an evangelical about this for a long time. I've been singing off this hymn sheet as well. And that is that esports is esports and influencers are influencers and gaming is gaming. And there's a Venn diagram where this can all meet up in the middle. But, you know, when you use like, oh, Ninja is the face of esports, he's not. He's like the face of streaming. He's not the face of esports. Like, he did compete in Halo. Yeah, he's got legit esports chops, but that's not what we know him for. Him running around, you know, back on, him doming people in pub games isn't the same thing.
For me on Renegades, actually, back in the day.
Yeah, I remember, right? So the owners massively watered down that esports niche, and we really had to have a good handle on what that niche was, because the hardcore audience is the one that's going to spend on esports products. So that's point one. Point two, the reason I think people sort of passively absorb the advertising in things like leagues is because the activations fucking suck. Like, here's a multi-million-dollar idea right now for free, right? Like, you've got players who had to, like, leave home because their parents didn't support their esports choices, right? Well, and you've got MasterCard as a fucking like sponsor. So, you know, why can't I interview a player talking about how good it was to like be able to go to, you know, apply for my first ever credit card, and it helped me fucking like make ends meet, and it helped me make rent till I got over the hump and got my first esports paycheck, and I couldn't have done it without them. And you apply this, like, it's completely fake, by the way, but you apply this like friendly veneer of debt slavery, you know, but like it would work. People would go, oh wow, MasterCard, the compassionate and ethical banking lender, you know? And then the third point is just...
It's a good idea.
Yeah, dude, I'm full of them, right? So what can I say? But, you know, so the third point is the narratives that we build around iconic players. It's so obfuscated now. You're talking about that hype dying down. It's because it's saturation. It is the same player, essentially, just with a different name, doing the same interview. We make the same hype video for them. They said they were bad in this team, but now they're in this team and they might be good. And it's just the same shit, and everyone's seen it a million times. There's no innovators, there's no creators, and people don't know how to find a unique angle on the stories we need to tell to make esports truly compelling and for new people to engage with it, which is a big problem, you know.
Well, and it's just like, you know, when you slap the logo, I mean, nobody just has an affinity. They applied the same sports marketing that works for an older audience onto esports products, which is just like, we will put our name on the analyst desk, but that doesn't really drive any affinity. Like, I don't ever feel that I understood, State Farm's creative from watching the State Farm analyst desk. Like, am I supposed to think State Farm does analysis? Because that was never made clear to me. Like, it's really feels discombobulated from the broadcast. And I get that with the teams too. I mean, the teams themselves have been so bad for the most part about putting out branded content and making it compelling and something that people actually legitimately want to watch.
By the way, this is like an abstract point, but I'll make it for comedic relief. And there's a point within it, which goes like this. When you go on the internet, I understand I'm somewhat of an internet boomer, but even so, right, one thing I've never understood about the internet, ever, is click-through ads. I can tell you, Devin, I've been on the internet for about 25 years, never even accidentally clicked one. Like, if I even accidentally, I'd throw my mouse at the wall, So I've never understood.
One iPhone once,
exactly.
And he never looked back.
So I've never understood that form of advertising. Essentially, to me, the joke is, even though I didn't used to have ad block 25 years ago, I always treated the internet like I had ad block in like the hood of my eyes, as it were. Like, if I see an ad here, my brain doesn't see the ad. And even add in, when you play video games, it's like this. You don't like look at all the ads in the background on, like you walk around a level in some dystopian world. You go, who gives a whatever, that's just background noise, flavor text, meme. I feel like esports, the experience of trying to do the traditional models like that. Like when you say that thing, Monty, they're like, and here we are at the nationwide analyst desk. My brain just goes like, blah, 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 analyst desk, right? It's the analyst desk. I actually, if anything, like my brain helps me not like be in a nightmare fucking Deus Ex / They Live dystopia by deleting that information for you. It's really good. So I feel like if you're an average fan, that stuff just becomes signal noise. I don't think you even listen to it. It doesn't seem like it works at all to me.
So you are a power user, and so
at least that's what I tell people anyway.
So to understand, basically, a brand is going to come to who usually it's an agency doing their advertising. They're going to say, look, we want this percentage of the campaign to be exposure, and we want this percentage of the campaign to be conversions. And so typically, what in traditional sports, you're going for like 90 to 95% conversion plays because of one concept in marketing, which is called impression to hit ratio. And basically, what that says is an impression, which means that I have impressed upon you a logo or an ad or something for you to think about this name Coca-Cola is one impression, right? That there is a certain number of impressions that will happen that will make a person more likely to buy that thing than they would buy some other thing like Mountain Dew. And that's a real thing. There's a lot of marketing research that shows this. There's a lot of academic science to back this up, that a certain number of impressions will result in a sale at some point. At some point in somebody's life, they'll go to a gas station and buy that thing. The problem is that endemics that came into esports expected conversions. They expected very high numbers of conversions, and all esports had to offer was impressions. Now, what nobody talks about is that there is a quality to an impression. Not all impressions are created equal. Esports impressions are dog shit because of all the reasons we just talked about, right? So an impression from a qualified influencer that is recommending a product, even if it's just an exposure play, is going to be way more value than the esports impressions. And I guess what happened was when these non-endemic brands that have been used to getting actually pretty good impressions through people like MSG and through people like the 76ers, because they're again the people that are following those teams by their cities were like diehard fans, and those impressions actually counted for a lot from an exposure play. Expected to get those same results from esports, but because of the players switching around, all the three reasons that Richard just listed, we didn't get those impressions at that same value. And so everybody just eventually pieced out. And the result was massive brand burnout over the past 3 to 4 years. Brands just say, fuck it, I don't need to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. And they did run them out. And a part of this is, again, the fault of the teams and the fault of the leagues for, instead of trying to fix the issues, right? Instead of trying to say, wow, this 2,000 view YouTube video really probably isn't going to deliver the kind of valuable impressions that they want, and maybe going back and doing, spending some more money to create content that could be valuable to these advertisers. What they did instead was they were just like, well, this deal's up. Next sucker in line, come pay us, $3 million. So they burned through a bunch of people. And I can just tell you guys, it's not that big companies or big brands and advertisers don't want the esports audience. Because here's the key to understand about the esports demographic. It is wholly unique. The people who watch esports are not getting advertised to usually as traditional sports fans, okay? So it's the same demo, which is like 18 to 35-year-old males, but it's entirely different than those same group of people, that same demo that you're advertising to in traditional sports or advertising to in other mediums. So it's the same demo, but different people. So they want access to these people.
By the
Which
way,
is
I just
why-
can't handle it. It looks like he's drinking like fucking Crisco or something, like some fucking sunflower oil, that massively. Like, it's like, Crisco,
like
Judy,
vegetable
lockdown,
oil.
motherfucker. Like, exactly. Get
I
Denzel
drink
in
a
here.
gallon of water a day, and I count it by having like a gallon bottle. It's just like
I see.
yeah. I'm just drinking
So-
way too much.
But the point is, guys, is that the brands, and I think Devin can talk to this, they're still interested in advertising with the space. They're just trying to figure out how to actually get to the esports fans in an effective way, which is one of the reasons that we are having success in terms of ad sales right now. Because again, it's not that everybody was burned. They're done with the bullshit from the teams and the tournament organizers.
I don't know.
And they're looking.
It's hard for me at this point to convince people to go into esports plays from a budget perspective. Like for me to get that kind of budget approved is a lot harder than for me to go to YouTube or to pay-per-click now. It didn't used to be that way. Like 2 to 3 years ago in the agency, again, like a huge percentage of our budget was being spent on Twitch. Now, relative, right? Our budget went up a lot more this year, but that was because we diversified into YouTube and into places that just make more sense from a ROAS perspective. I just don't. Brands that have heard of esports at this point have a kind of foul taste in their mouth. And there's been a couple of real big offenders. Now, look, there's always going to be shit to sell. There's always going to be shit to sell, right? You'll always be able to build a agency, and especially if you're sophisticated, like yourself, and be able to sell this. But a couple of big contenders have really burned out a lot of brands. And I'll point the finger at some of the larger tournament organizers outside of Riot. Who have charged those brands a lot of money, and I can tell you definitively that they will never come back, and they're continuing to do it as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, to that point as well, though, I think it's kind of important that we acknowledge that the esports fan is a thing, right? I get that, but it's more just to do with the overall demographic, I believe. Like in my experience from talking to people, there's a certain archetype of a desirable customer in terms of, what age you want to shoot for, how much disposable income they're going to have, et cetera, et cetera. And it just so happens that there's a lot of that archetype in esports. And so this is why the history of esports is essentially various entities attempting to monopolize esports. That's pretty much all the history is, going all the way back to the early esports progenitors. They were speculators pre the first esports bubble, pre-CPL. And people want to control the landscape because it gives you access to, this young demographic of customers that you'll be able to sell to, not just once, not just twice, multiple products over multiple years. They grow up with your thing, they have children of their own, and immediately plug them in as future customers, and on and on and on and on it goes. Kind of like the way people used to think about car ownership and things like that back in days gone by in America. And so ultimately, this has been the fundamental problem. We've never actually recognized that we've never recognized what an esports fan is and how do we activate them. It's almost like an incidental thing that an esports fan just happens to be this type of desirable demographic that everyone's essentially pitching to. So and that I think is a much bigger problem in the terms of that, we've never conceptually understood the scale of esports because there's so much conflation going on.
And to your point, 100% correct. I think a lot of that is the lack of sophistication by actually real big hitter fucking agencies coming in and like they do in traditional sports and other places and being like, yo, these are what the demographics are. So we use a platform called Geek. It's a GIQ. And I'll just look at 100 Thieves demographics right now, right? So you've got 68.12% people under 24. 25% above 25 to 29, 93% male. These are people with some disposable income, right? Their average, let's see if I just check the table on that. Between $30,000 and $49,000 a year, 30%, $50,000 to $74,000, 27%. Those are pretty. People got some money to spend, right? So, like you said, this demographic is there. Like they can do it, but accessing that person and understanding that, and creating ads that appeal to those people. That lack of sophistication is what is killing ads in esports. There's just not enough professionals. And to that point, at CLG, I wasn't that professional either. I didn't know what the fuck I was talking about. And so many of these deals got done arbitrarily. Like we were throwing out sponsor numbers. There's no now if I do a deal, right, I got a CPM. I know exactly what those 1,000 people are worth. I can compare it to an AdWords category or a Bing category. I can know what that keyword is worth. Back at CLG, people were like, yeah, what do you think you should be sponsored for? $200,000 sound good? Yeah, sure, let's go. Okay, that's like 99% of deals that got done in esports, right? And I think still get done today. There just isn't enough sophistication.
Yeah, and I think as well a much bigger problem is there's a lot of people who talk about esports and how they believe in esports and believe in the success of esports. You know, I used to do this, right? Like I used to believe esports was going to be a successful product that would get to a place, it would become mainstream. And what I realize now is actually driving it in that direction has essentially killed it. You know, it needed to stay niche and on the periphery. Like I wrote an article, I've never published it. It's called "The Party's Over," but I compare it to what happened with the commercialization of punk rock. And it's like 1 minute it's like this edgy outlier fringe culture that you buy into. The next moment you can get a Nevermind the Bollocks MasterCard and fucking John Lydon's advertising butter on fucking British television. You know, it's like it got commercialized and it's not the same thing anymore. It's actually the antithesis of what it was, and that's kind of happened a lot with esports. But anyway, that's like a moot point. For me, I think the fundamental problem at the core of the great economic pyramid is I don't know of one person in esports who truly believes and truly doesn't treat it like greater fool theory. Like, I think that's why crypto, the implosion of crypto, kind of watching that has also given people a bit of a wake-up call about esports, because like, oh shit, it's kind of the same thing. It has no intrinsic value. Everyone's upselling. It's all smoke and mirrors. What's going on? And so, for me, we needed people who came in early to build like actual tangible revenue streams, things you could touch, things you can measure, but we never did. And instead everyone was saying, hey, look, we've got a slot in a league that's definitely worth 20 million, and in fact it could be worth 40 next year. That's what those teams are going to be charged. And it's like, okay, is any of that real? No, it isn't. Okay, but don't worry, we're going to get out, we're going to cash out in 5 years. There's another idiot coming along who'll buy this for 600 million, and we all go, and we all retire, and we all get a yacht. And it's like, I've never talked to anyone on a business level that didn't want to cash out of esports. They're not true believers.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.